Story 1. The Clearing. I never imagined a family camping trip could become the terrifying night of my life. It was meant to be a simple getaway, a chance to unplug and make memories with my loved ones. Instead, it turned into a nightmare that clings to me, replaying in my head like one of those scary stories you hear around a fire. I'm Linda, 63, and I was RV camping with my husband Gary, 77, our daughter Sarah, 40, her 6-year-old son Noah, and Sarah's boyfriend Mark, 46, along with his 2 sons Jake, 23, and Tyler, 21. We'd chosen a secluded spot near Broken Bow, Oklahoma, for our wilderness survival retreat. The area was stunning. Acres of pine trees stretching tall at open fields dotted with wildflowers and a small pond that shimmered in the light. It felt like the perfect place to escape the grind of everyday life and enjoy the RV life. We rolled in on Friday evening with our rig, a beat-up old thing we'd borrowed from Gary's brother, and set up a couple of tents for the boys. The plan for our outdoor adventure was simple: fish, hike, roast marshmallows, and just be together. Saturday morning was everything I'd hoped for. After a breakfast of scrambled eggs and bacon cooked over the campfire, we headed to the pond. Noah squealed with delight as he reeled in a tiny fish, his face glowing with pride. "Look, Grandma, I'm a fisherman," he shouted, holding it up. Gary chuckled and helped him unhook it, while Mark taught Jake and Tyler how to cast their lines. Sarah and I sat on a blanket, sipping coffee, and watching the scene unfold. "This is what it's all about," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. I nodded, my heart full, never expecting the horror stories that would soon unfold. By afternoon, we'd hiked a trail that wound through the woods, the air thick with the scent of pine and earth. Noah collected pine cones, stuffing them into his backpack until it bulged. Jake and Tyler raced each other to a clearing, laughing and shoving playfully. We were tired but happy when we got back to the campsite, and Mark fired up the grill for burgers. As the sun dipped low, we gathered around the fire pit, the crackle of burning wood mixing with our chatter. Noah was nestled in Sarah's lap, marshmallow goo on his cheeks, while Gary told a silly story about a bear that stole his fishing rod years ago. The kids giggled, and I felt a deep contentment settle over me. That's when things started to shift toward a creepy encounter. Earlier that day, our RV had gotten stuck in a patch of mud near the campsite entrance. We'd all pushed and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. Mark was cursing under his breath when a man appeared, riding an orange tractor from the neighboring property. "Looks like you folks could use some help," he called out, his voice warm and easy. We were relieved. "You're not wrong," Mark said, wiping mud from his hands. The man introduced himself as Jim, a local who lived on the land next door. He was in his early 30s, stocky with a scruffy beard and a faded baseball cap. He hooked a chain to his tractor and yanked the RV free in no time. "Wow, thank you," Gary said, shaking Jim's hand. "That was above and beyond." Jim waved it off with a grin. "No trouble at all. Neighbors got to look out for each other." His eyes crinkled when he smiled, and he seemed genuine. "You folks here for the weekend?" "Yeah, just camping with family," Sarah said, bouncing Noah on her knee. "It's our first time out here." "Well, you picked a good spot," Jim replied. "This land's got a lot of history." There was a flicker in his expression, something I couldn't place, adding a layer of mystery to the air, but it passed quickly. Gary, ever the host, offered him a seat by the fire. "Stay for a beer?" Jim hesitated, then nodded. Don't mind if I do. He grabbed a folding chair and joined us, cracking open a can of beer Mark handed him. The conversation flowed easily at first. Jim told us about growing up in the area, how his family had owned their land for generations. He knew every trail, every fishing hole. You ever stargaze out here? He asked, leaning forward. There's a clearing about a quarter mile into the woods. Stars look like they're close enough to touch. That sounds awesome, Jake said, his eyes lighting up. Tyler nodded, always up for an adventure. Noah perked up too. Can we go, Mommy? He asked Sarah. It's getting late, buddy, she said, ruffling his hair. But Mark shrugged. Why not? It's not far, right, Jim? Nah, it's a quick walk, Jim said, his tone casual. I can show you the way. I felt a twinge of unease, the kind you get in psychological thrillers. You sure it's safe? I asked, glancing at Noah's small frame. Jim met my eyes, his smile steady. Safe as can be. I walk those woods all the time. Something about his voice felt too smooth, but everyone else seemed excited, so I let it go. Mark, Jake, Tyler, and Noah decided to go with Jim to the clearing. We won't be long, Mark promised, kissing Sarah's cheek. Be careful, I called after them as they grabbed flashlights and headed into the trees. Jim led the way, his silhouette fading into the darkness. I watched until I couldn't see them anymore, a knot forming in my stomach. Gary, Sarah, and I stayed by the fire. Gary was telling Sarah about his old camping trips, and she teased him about his terrible sense of direction. I tried to join in, but my mind kept drifting to the woods, imagining forest horror scenarios. The fire was dying down, and I was exhausted from the day, so I decided to rest. I'm heading to the RV, I said, standing. Don't stay up too late, you two. Night, Mom, Sarah said, smiling. Gary gave me a wink. I climbed into the RV, changed into pajamas, and lay on the narrow bed, the hum of crickets outside lulling me. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, gunshots shattered the quiet. They came from the woods, sharp and relentless, one after another. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs. What was that? I whispered, fumbling for my glasses. Another shot rang out, then another. My hands shook as I pulled on my shoes and stumbled out of the RV into a real-life slasher horror scene. Sarah and Gary were already standing, staring toward the trees. The fire was down to embers, casting long shadows. Those were gunshots, Gary said, his voice low and tense. Maybe hunters? Hunters don't shoot like that at night, Sarah said, her face pale. She clutched her phone, but there was no signal. Where's Mark? Where's Noah? The shots stopped, leaving a heavy silence that pressed against my chest. We stood frozen, straining to hear anything. Footsteps, voices, anything. Minutes crawled by, each one tightening the knot in my gut. Then I saw movement at the edge of the campsite. It was Jim walking back alone, a scene straight out of Unsolved Mysteries. Where's my son? Sarah demanded, stepping forward. Where's Mark, Jake, Tyler? Jim didn't answer. His face was blank, his eyes empty like the warmth from earlier had drained away. He kept walking toward us, slow and deliberate. That's when I saw it. A handgun glinting in his right hand, catching the faint light from the embers. Jim, what's going on? Gary asked, his voice steady but edged with fear. He stepped in front of Sarah, shielding her. Jim stopped a few feet away, his gaze flicking between us. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice flat. This land ain't yours. Before I could process his words, he raised the gun and fired. The shot hit Gary in the chest, and he crumpled to the ground with a sickening thud. Sarah screamed, a raw, piercing sound that cut through me. Blood spread across Gary's shirt, dark and glistening. I couldn't move. My mind was screaming, but my body was rooted to the spot like I was watching it happen to someone else in a terrifying true story. Sarah turned and ran for the RV, her sobs choking the air. Jim didn't hesitate. He strode after her, kicking the RV door open with a splintering crack. I heard her scream again, then 2 more gunshots. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. My legs gave out and I dropped to my knees behind the fire pit, gravel digging into my skin. Jim's voice slithered through the darkness. "I know you're still out there," he called, low and taunting. "You can't hide forever." Panic clawed at me. I had to hide now. My eyes darted around the campsite, landing on a pile of folded camp chairs stacked against a tree half covered by a tarp. I crawled toward it, my hands scraping the dirt, and squeezed behind the chairs, pulling the tarp over me. I curled into a ball, my breath shallow and ragged. The smell of canvas and damp earth filled my nose, but I barely noticed. All I could think was, "Don't move. Don't make a sound," as if I were in a survival horror game. Jim's boots crunched closer. He was searching, his steps slow and methodical. I heard him rip open the tents, the fabric tearing. He muttered to himself, his voice low and angry, words I couldn't make out. At one point he stopped, right by the chairs. I saw his boots through a gap in the tarp, inches from my face. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he'd hear it. I pressed my hand over my mouth, stifling a whimper. He stood there for what felt like forever, then moved on. I heard him check under the RV, kick over a cooler, the plastic cracking. "Come on out," he said again, his voice eerily calm. "I ain't got all night." I didn't move. I couldn't. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made me flinch. Was he gone? Was he watching? Waiting for me to slip up? My body ached from staying curled up, but fear kept me frozen. Images flashed through my mind. Gary's lifeless body, Sarah's scream, Noah's little face. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears leaking down my cheeks. Hours dragged by, each one an eternity. My legs cramped and my hands were numb, but I didn't dare shift. The night was alive with sounds. Crickets, distant owls, the occasional creak of trees. Each one felt like a trap, like Jim was out there, circling. I kept replaying his words. "This land ain't yours." What did that mean? Why was he doing this? As the sky began to lighten, a faint gray creeping through the trees, I dared to peek out. The campsite was still, the fire pit cold and ashy. The RV door hung open, swaying slightly. I listened for footsteps, for any sign of Jim, but heard nothing. My body screamed to stay hidden, but I had to know if anyone was alive. I crawled out, my joints protesting, and crept toward the RV, staying low. My heart thudded as I climbed the steps. Inside, I found Gary and Sarah, both gone. Blood pooled beneath them, and I gagged, turning away. I couldn't bring myself to search the woods for Mark, Jake, Tyler, or Noah. Deep down, I knew they were dead. A conclusion to one of the most scary true stories imaginable. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone from the RV table. By some miracle, I had 1 bar of signal. I dialed 911, my voice barely a whisper. "There's been a shooting," I said, choking on the words. "My family, they're all dead. Please hurry." The operator kept me on the line, her voice calm but urgent. "Stay where you are, ma'am. Help is on the way. I sank to the ground outside the RV, clutching the phone, my eyes fixed on the woods. What if Jim came back? Police arrived in what felt like hours, but was probably less than 20 minutes. Their sirens wailed, growing louder until they surrounded the campsite. Officers swarmed the area, guns drawn, while a paramedic wrapped me in a blanket and led me to an ambulance. I told them everything: Jim, the tractor, the gun, the stargazing trip. They found him at his mother's house nearby, still holding the rifle. He didn't resist arrest. Later I learned the whole story of this true crime nightmare. Jim had been furious that Mark had bought the land his family had owned for decades. He'd lost it years ago. And seeing us there, laughing, camping, making memories, snapped something in him. He'd lured Mark, Jake, Tyler, and Noah into the woods and shot them one by one. Then he'd come back for Gary and Sarah. I was the only one who'd escaped because I'd hidden behind those chairs. The guilt eats at me. Why didn't I stop them from going with Jim? Why didn't I trust my gut? I see their faces every night. Gary's kind smile, Sarah's laugh, Noah's bright eyes. But knowing Jim's locked away, that he'll never hurt anyone else, is the only thing that keeps me sane. That, and the memory of that night, every detail burned into my soul, a reminder of how close I came to dying in those woods. Story 2. The rest stop. I was bone tired, my eyes burning from hours of driving my RV, a beat-up but cozy rig I called Wanderlust, across the endless highways of Nebraska on a long road trip. I'd been living on the road for months, chasing freedom. But that night, all I wanted was sleep. I pulled into a small rest stop off the interstate, the kind you'd miss if you blinked. It was deserted, just a flickering street lamp casting weak light over a cracked parking lot. The restroom building nearby was a mess. Graffiti scrawled across its cinder block walls. One window boarded up, another shattered. A rusty trash can overflowed with soda cans and wrappers. No other cars, no other people. It felt off, like the setting of a Paranormal Activity video, but I was too exhausted to care. I locked the doors, double-checked the deadbolt, and crawled into my bunk at the back of the RV. The familiar creak of the mattress lulling me into a deep sleep. A loud thud ripped me awake. My heart slammed against my ribs, instant and hard, like I'd been shocked. I froze, holding my breath, straining to hear. Another thud, heavier, like someone pounding a fist against the RV's aluminum side. The digital clock on the counter glowed 2:17 a.m., its red numbers cutting through the dark of this nightmare. My mouth went dry. I slid out of bed, my bare feet cold on the vinyl floor, and crept toward the small window above the sink. My hands shook as I pinched the edge of the curtain, peeling it back just enough to peek outside and witness a creepy encounter. A man stood there, right outside, staring straight at me. His eyes were wide, wild, like they didn't belong in a human face, catching the street lamp's sickly yellow glow. His lips twisted into a grin, slow and sinister, showing stained, uneven teeth. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea hitting me. He raised a fist and banged on the window again, deliberate, each hit echoing in the quiet. Thud, thud, thud. The glass rattled in its frame and I flinched, my heart racing so fast it hurt. "Hey, friend," he said, his voice low, almost sing-song, muffled through the glass but clear enough to make my skin crawl. Come out, wherever you are." I stumbled back, my hip banging into the counter. Pain shot through me, but I barely noticed. Look, I don't want any trouble, I called out, my voice cracking, barely holding together. Just leave me alone, okay? He laughed, a sharp, jagged sound that made my blood run cold, making me feel like a character in scary stories to tell in the dark. Oh, there's going to be trouble, all right, but not for me. He tilted his head like he was studying me, his grin never fading. His clothes were filthy. A torn jacket, jeans streaked with dirt, boots caked in mud. He looked like he'd been living rough, maybe for years. Then I heard it, a sloshing sound, like liquid splashing against the ground. A sharp, bitter smell hit me, unmistakable gasoline. My heart dropped into my stomach as I realized I was in a thriller situation. I rushed to the other side of the RV, yanking open the curtain above the dinette. He was there, pouring a metal can of gas around the base of Wanderlust, the liquid glinting as it pooled on the asphalt. He moved slowly, deliberately, like he was savoring it. My breath came in short gasps. I pressed my hands against the window, my palms sweaty, leaving smudges on the glass. He looked up, caught my eye, and his grin widened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a matchbook, holding it up like a trophy. "You smell that?" he said, his voice louder now, taunting. "That's your home going bye-bye." "Please stop," I yelled, banging on the window so hard it shook. "What do you want? I'll give you anything, money, food, anything." My voice was desperate, pleading, but I didn't care. I just wanted him gone. He struck a match, the tiny flame flaring bright in the dark. "I want to watch it burn," he said, his eyes locked on mine, unblinking. "You gonna come out now, or are you gonna cook in there like a rat?" Panic clawed at my chest, my mind racing through wilderness horror survival tactics. I spun around, scanning the RV's cramped interior. My phone was on the counter, but the signal was dead. Always was in places like this. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the sink, my hands trembling so bad I fumbled the handle, almost dropping it. The RV's door was my only way out, but he was right there, circling like a wolf. I heard another match strike, then a soft whoosh as flames caught. Smoke curled up outside, thick and black, seeping through the door's edges. The smell of burning rubber stung my nose, and the crackle of fire grew louder. I crouched by the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. "You don't have to do this," I shouted, hoping my voice reached him. "Just take what you want and go." He didn't answer. Instead, I heard his boots, crunching on the gravel, moving closer to the door. The handle jiggled, then rattled hard, like he was trying to rip it open. I gripped the extinguisher tighter, my knuckles white. The smoke was thicker now, making my eyes water, my throat burn. I had seconds, maybe less, before the fire spread. I took a deep breath, my lungs stinging, and made a choice for my survival. I unlocked the door, kicked it open, and aimed the extinguisher. He was right there, his face twisted with rage, his fist raised. I pulled the trigger, and a blast of white foam hit him square in the face. He screamed, a raw, furious sound clawing at his eyes as he staggered back, tripping over the gas can. The flames were climbing higher, licking the RV's side. The heat, scorching my skin as I bolted past him. My bare feet hit the gravel, sharp rocks cutting into my soles, but I didn't stop. I sprinted toward the highway, my arms flailing, screaming for help. My voice was hoarse, barely carrying over the crackle of the fire behind me. The rest stop faded into the dark, the flames casting an orange glow that lit up the night. I kept running, my chest heaving, my legs burning, until I saw headlights in the distance. A pickup truck slowed, its tires crunching on the shoulder. A woman, maybe in her 50s, leaned out the driver's window, her face pale, eyes wide with worry. "Get in," she shouted, throwing open the passenger door. I scrambled inside, collapsing onto the seat, my body shaking. "There's a man," I gasped, words tumbling out. "He tried to burn my RV. He's still there." "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tight as she glanced at me, then back at the road. "Do you need me to take you to the police?" "Yes, please," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I twisted in the seat, looking back. Flames were swallowing Wanderlust, the RV's frame glowing red against the night. The man was gone, melted into the shadows like he'd never been there. A ghost in an urban legend. "I saw the fire from the road," she said, gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles pale. "Thought it was an accident at first. Then I saw you running. Never seen anything like that in my life." "He wanted to kill me," I said, my hands trembling in my lap. "He was pouring gas, lighting matches. I don't even know why." She shook her head, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "Some people are just broken," she said softly. "You're lucky you got out that—" We sped toward the nearest town, the truck's engine rumbling, the highway stretching dark and empty ahead. My mind kept replaying his face, those wild eyes, that awful grin. I could still smell the gasoline, feel the heat of the flames. My home, everything I owned, was burning back there, and I couldn't do anything about it. We pulled into a small police station, its neon sign buzzing in the quiet. I stumbled out, my legs weak, and told the officers everything. The banging, the gasoline, the matches, the man's taunts. They listened, jotting notes, their faces grim. They sent a patrol to the rest stop, but by the time they got there, the fire had gutted Wanderlust. The RV was a blackened shell, its tires melted, windows shattered. They found the gas can, dented and empty, but no sign of the man. They figured he was a drifter, maybe someone living off the grid, preying on lone travelers at remote stops. No prints, no tracks, no way to find him. Another entry in the unsolved cases files. The woman who saved me waited while I gave my statement. Before she left, she pressed a piece of paper into my hand with her phone number. "Call if you need anything," she said, her voice kind but firm. "You're going to be okay?" I nodded, but I didn't feel okay. I felt hollow, like part of me had burned up with the RV. I lost everything that night. My clothes, my photos, my sense of safety. I kept seeing his face in my dreams, hearing his voice. Come out, wherever you are." I don't know why he chose me, why he wanted to hurt me. Maybe he didn't need a reason. Now when I talk to other RVEers, I tell them what happened. I tell them to park in well-lit lots near other people, to keep a phone charged, to trust their gut if a place feels wrong. That night changed me. It taught me the road can be beautiful, but it can also be cruel, and some dangers hide in the quiet places where you least expect them. Story 3. The Bowl. I steered our RV into the sandy lot near Assateague Island, a secluded stretch of beach camping known as the Bowl. Dunes rose around us like frozen waves, and the ocean's steady hum filled the air. My husband Mike and I craved a quiet weekend. Just us, the sand and the open water, a perfect nature retreat. Another RV was already parked nearby, a white rig with a faded blue stripe and a small awning pitched out front. 2 cats peered from its window, their eyes catching the fading light. The owners, Robert and Susan Miller, a retired Navy couple, waved as we set up. They had warm smiles, the kind that made you feel like old friends. "First time here?" Robert called, walking over with a thermos of coffee. His gray hair was cropped short, and his t-shirt had a sailboat logo. "Yeah," I said, brushing sand off my hands. "Heard this place is peaceful." Susan joined us, her locket swinging as she carried a folding chair. "It's our favorite spot," she said. "No crowds, just you and the sea." Mike grinned, unloading our cooler. "Sounds perfect," he said. We chatted as we set up camp, their stories of RV trips across the country pulling us in. They'd seen mountains in Maine, deserts in Utah, and beaches up and down the coast. That evening we gathered around a campfire they'd built. The flames snapped, sending sparks into the dark, and the dunes cast long shadows that seemed to shift on their own, reminiscent of creepy camping stories. Robert poured more coffee, his voice steady as he shared a story about a whale-watching trip in New England. "Thought the boat would tip, but Susan just laughed," he said, nudging her. She rolled her eyes, smiling. "You screamed louder than me," she teased. I sipped my cocoa, the mug warm in my hands. "You two make it sound so easy, this full-time RV life," I said. Susan shrugged, her locket glinting. "It's freedom," she said. "You pick a spot, stay as long as you want, then move on." Mike tossed a stick into the fire. "We're still figuring it out," he admitted. "But this place? It's got me hooked." We talked until the fire died to embers, the ocean's rhythm lulling us. "See you in the morning," Robert said, as they headed to their RV, its windows glowing softly. Mike and I climbed into ours, the familiar creak of the door comforting. I fell asleep to the sound of waves, but around midnight something jolted me awake. Voices, low and sharp, cut through the quiet. Not Robert's deep chuckle or Susan's soft tone. These were different, urgent, like an argument bitten off mid-sentence. My heart thudded. I slipped to the window, easing the blinds apart. 2 figures stood near the Miller's RV, their shapes blurry in the moonlight. One was tall, a baseball cap pulled low over his face, his flashlight beam darting over the sand. The other, a woman with a ponytail, gestured sharply, her voice a hissed whisper I couldn't make out. My stomach knotted. "Mike," I whispered, shaking him. He groaned, half asleep. "What's wrong?" I pointed to the window. "Someone's out there, near their RV." He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and peered out. The figures were gone. The beach silent again. "Maybe just late-night walkers," he mumbled, but his voice wavered. I didn't sleep after that, my ears straining for every sound. Morning came, and the beach felt wrong, too still. I stepped outside, expecting to see Robert firing up his portable grill, or Susan tossing a ball for their cats. But their RV was quiet. The door slightly open, swaying with a faint creak. My chest tightened. "Mike, come look," I called. He joined me, his brows furrowed. We walked over, sand sticking to my sneakers. "Robert, Susan?" I said, knocking on the open door. No answer. Inside, their cats paced, meowing loudly, their food bowls empty. A coffee mug sat on the counter, half full, next to a folded newspaper. Susan's locket, the one she'd worn last night, was gone from the table. "This isn't right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike scanned the RV, his jaw tight. "Where'd they go?" Their truck's still here. The pickup they towed was parked beside the RV, keys dangling in the ignition. We searched the beach, walking the length of the dunes, calling their names. Robert, Susan. My voice echoed, swallowed by the vastness. The sand was undisturbed. No footprints leading away. My unease grew, a cold weight in my gut. Around noon, near a pile of driftwood tangled with seaweed, I froze. Those figures from last night were back. The tall man in the baseball cap and the woman with the ponytail stood by a rusty pickup truck, parked just beyond the dunes. They were dragging something heavy, wrapped in a blue tarp, the kind you'd use for camping gear. It sagged in the middle, and they grunted as they hauled it to the truck's bed. My breath hitched. Mike, look, I whispered, pulling him behind a dune. He squinted, his face draining of color. What's in that tarp? He said, his voice low. The woman glanced our way, her eyes narrowing, and I ducked lower, my heart pounding so hard I thought it burst. The man slammed the tailgate shut, and they climbed into the truck, tires spitting sand as they sped off. Back at our RV, I couldn't sit still. We have to do something, I told Mike, my hands shaking as I poured water I didn't drink. Those people, that tarp, it's not right. He nodded, already grabbing his phone. I'm calling the ranger, he said. He dialed, his voice steady as he explained. Our neighbors Robert and Susan Miller, they're gone, their RV's open, cats are alone, and we saw some people acting strange. The ranger promised to send someone, but hours dragged by with no sign of help. I kept glancing at the Miller's RV, the open door like a wound. Their cat's cries carried through the quiet, each one twisting the knot in my stomach tighter. That night I couldn't close my eyes. Every creak of our RV, every rustle outside made me jump. I kept the blind shut, but I swore I heard footsteps crunching in the sand, slow and deliberate. Mike, you hear that? I whispered. He listened, then shook his head. Just the wind, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. I clutched the blanket, imagining those figures outside, their flashlights sweeping closer. 2 days later, police cars and ranger trucks swarmed the beach, their lights flashing against the dunes. A ranger knocked on our RV door, his face heavy with bad news. We found 2 bodies buried in the sand about a mile from here, he said. It's Robert and Susan Miller. My knees gave out and Mike caught me, his hands trembling. Buried? I choked out. The ranger nodded. Looks like murder. Their RV was stolen, but we tracked it to the border, caught the suspects driving it. My mind flashed to the tall man, the woman with the ponytail, the tarp sagging in their hands. I felt sick, my throat burning. We packed up that afternoon, our movements frantic. As I folded our chairs, I spotted something glinting in the sand near our site. It was Susan's locket, half buried, its silver chain tangled in seaweed. I picked it up, my fingers shaking, and opened it. A tiny photo of Robert and Susan on their wedding day stared back, their smiles frozen in time. Tears stung my eyes. I handed it to the police, my voice breaking as I explained where I'd found it. We haven't camped since. The bowl was supposed to be our escape, a place to breathe free. Instead, it's a nightmare I can't shake. I see those figures in my dreams, their shadows stretching across the dunes. I hear the cat cries, sharp and desperate. I think of Robert's laugh, Susan's locket, and how fast it all vanished. Mike and I stay close to home now, sticking to crowded parks if we travel at all. The open road doesn't feel free anymore. It feels like a trap waiting for strangers in the dark to turn paradise into horror. If these stories didn't make you want to trade your camping gear for a high-security bunker, go ahead and hit that like button, share this with your bravest road trip buddies, and subscribe, because the next story is definitely less likely to involve a blue tarp. Hopefully.